do, 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 da, da, dee, 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 da, da, do, do, da. Howdy, 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 howdy. Today's video is going to be soft-spoken, like this, while I read this classic book by Frances Burney called 𝗪𝗡𝗡. I had been looking for books that I could read because I find reading can be so relaxing, and being read to especially, and the sounds of the book and the pages flipping and just escaping into a story. Maybe when nightmares are flaring up or your brain can't stop spinning, escaping into a world and just listening and relaxing. I had never heard of 𝗪𝗡𝗡, but once I read the back, I was pretty intrigued. So, let's read that. Frances Burney's first and most enduringly popular novel is a vivid, satirical, and seductive account of the pleasures and dangers of fashionable life in the late 18th century London. I like history a lot, and especially foreign. As she describes her heroine's entry into society, womanhood, and, inevitably, love, Burney exposes the vulnerability of female innocence in an image-conscious and often cruel world where social snobbery and sexual aggression are played out in the public arenas of pleasure gardens, theater visits, and balls. But Evelina's innocence also makes her a shrewd commentator on the excesses and absurdities of manners and social ambitions, as well as attracting the attention of the eminently eligible Lord Orville. It intrigues me so much because I wonder how much we will be able to relate, with a world built around technology and social media and silly things that we may do for love or social acceptance, beauty standards, etc. So I thought this would be interesting to read. Have our own little book club. So, sit back, relax, can just listen to my voice, not really pay attention to the words, and drift off to sleep, or go along on this journey with me. Make your comments on it, talk about the story and what's happening, and escape the world a little bit with me. Got some rain in the back for that tingly little cherry on top. I love book sounds. So hopefully I don't fumble too much, and we can have a good little time right now. let's get started. There were a lot of pages before the actual book started. Introduction, timeline of the author's life, more about the author, a preface. So, skipped all that, and we're just gonna jump in. Evelina, Volume 1, Letter 1. Lady Howard to the Rev. Mr. Bellard. Howard Grove. Can there, my good sir, be anything more painful to a friendly mind than the necessity of communicating disagreeable intelligence? Indeed, it is sometimes difficult to determine whether the relator or the receiver of evil tidings is most to be pitied. I have just had a letter from Madame Duval. She is totally at a loss in what manner to behave. She seems desirous to repair the wrongs she has done, yet wishes the world to believe her blameless. She would fain cast upon another the odium of those misfortunes for which she alone is answerable. Her letter is violent, sometimes abusive, and that of you, to whom she is under obligations which are greater even than her faults, but to whose advice she wickedly imputes all the sufferings of her much injured daughter, the late Lady Belmont. The chief purport of her writing I will acquaint you with. The letter itself is not worthy your notice. She tells me that she has, for many years past, been in continual expectation of making a journey to England, which prevented her writing for information concerning this melancholy subject by giving her hopes of making personal inquiry. But family occurrences have still detained her in France, which country she now sees no prospect of quitting. She has, therefore, lately used her utmost endeavours to obtain a faithful account of whatever related to her ill-advised daughter, the result of which giving her some reason to apprehend that, upon her deathbed, she bequeathed an infant orphan to the world, she most graciously says that if you, with whom she understands the child is placed, will procure authentic proofs of its relationship to her, you may send it to Paris, where she will properly provide for it. This woman is undoubtedly at length conscious of her most unnatural conduct. It is evident from her writing that she is still as vulgar and illiterate as when her first husband, Mr. Evelyn, had the weakness to marry her. Nor does she at all apologize for addressing herself to me, though I was only once in her company. This letter has excited in my daughter Mervyn a strong desire to be informed of the motives which induced Madame Duval to abandon the unfortunate Lady Belmont, at a time when a mother's protection was so peculiarly necessary for her peace and her reputation. Notwithstanding, I was personally acquainted with all the parties concerned in that affair. This subject always appeared of too delicate a nature to be spoken of with the principals. I cannot, therefore, satisfy Mrs. Mervyn otherwise than by applying to you. By saying that you may send the child, Madame Duval aims at conferring where she most owes obligation. I pretend not to give you advice. You, to whose generous protection this helpless orphan is indebted for everything, are the best and only judge of what she ought to do. But I am much concerned for the trouble and uneasiness which this unworthy woman may occasion you. My daughter and my grandchild join with me in desiring to be most kindly remembered to the amiable girl, and they bid me remind you that the annual visit to Howard Grove, which we were formerly promised, has been discontinued for more than 4 years. I am, dear sir, with great regard, your most obedient servant and friend, M. Howard. They really just throw you right into it. Letter 2. Mr. Villars to Lady Howard, Berry Hill, Dorsetshire. You're gonna have to forgive me for some of my pronunciations, especially of London geography and city names. Your ladyship did but too well foresee the perplexity and uneasiness of which Madame Duval's letter has been productive. However, I ought rather to be thankful that I have so many years remained unmolested than repine at my present embarrassment, since it proves, at least, that this wretched woman is at length awakened to remorse. In regard to my answer, I must humbly request your ladyship to write to this effect, that I would not, upon any account, intentionally offend Madame Duval, but that I have weighty, nay, unanswerable reasons for detaining her granddaughter at present in England, the principal of which is that it was the earnest desire of one to whose will she owes implicit duty. Madame Duval may be assured that she meets with the utmost attention and tenderness, that her education, however short of my wishes, almost exceeds my abilities, and that I flatter myself, when the time arrives that she shall pay her duty to her grandmother, Madame Duval will find no reason to be dissatisfied with what has been done for her. Your ladyship will not, I am sure, be surprised at this answer. Madame Duval is by no means a proper companion or guardian for a young woman. She is at once uneducated and unprincipled, ungentle in her temper, and unamiable in her manners. I have long known that she has persuaded herself to harbor an aversion for me, unhappy woman. I can only regard her as an object of pity. I dare not hesitate at a request from Mrs. Mervyn, yet in complying with it, I shall, for her own sake, be as concise as I possibly can, since the cruel transactions which preceded the birth of my ward can afford no entertainment to a mind so humane as hers. Your ladyship may probably have heard that I had the honour to accompany Mr. Evelyn, the grandfather of my young charge, when upon his travels in capacity of tutor. His unhappy marriage, immediately upon his return to England with Madame Duval, then a waiting girl at a tavern, contrary to the advice and entreaties of all his friends, among whom I was myself the most urgent to dissuade him, induced him to abandon his native land and fix his abode in France. Thither he was followed by shame and repentance, feelings which his heart was not framed to support, for, notwithstanding, he had been too weak to resist the allurements of beauty, which nature, though this is an awkward word that I do not feel comfortable saying, which might be silly. I'm just gonna skip it. Had with a lavish hand bestowed on his wife. Yet he was a young man of excellent character, and, till thus unaccountably infatuated, of unblemished conduct. He survived this ill-judged marriage but 2 years. Upon his deathbed, with an unsteady hand, he wrote me the following note. My friend, forget your resentment in favor of your humanity. A father, trembling for the welfare of his child, bequeaths her to your care. O Villars, hear, pity, and relieve me. Had my circumstances permitted me, I should have answered these words by an immediate journey to Paris, but I was obliged to act by the agency of a friend, who was upon the spot, and present at the opening of the will. Mr. Evelyn left to me a legacy of £1,000, and the sole guardianship of his daughter's person till her 18th year, conjuring me, in the most affecting terms, to take the charge of her education till she was able to act with propriety for herself. But in regard to fortune, he left her wholly dependent on her mother, to whose tenderness he earnestly recommended her. Thus, though he would not, to a woman low-bred and illiberal as Mrs. Evelyn, trust the mind and morals of his daughter, he nevertheless thought proper to secure her that respect and duty which, from her own child, were certainly her due. But, unhappily, it never occurred to him that the mother, on her part, could fail in affection or justice. Miss Evelyn, Madame, from the 2nd to the 18th year of her life, was brought up under my care, and, except when at school, under my roof. I need not speak to your ladyship of the virtues of that excellent young creature. She loved me as her father, nor was Mrs. Villars less valued by her, while to me she became so dear, that her loss was little less afflicting to me than which I have since sustained of Mrs. Villars herself. At that period of her life we parted. Her mother, then married to Monsieur Duval, sent for her to Paris. How often have I since regretted that I did not accompany her thither. Protected and supported by me, the misery and disgrace which awaited her might, perhaps, have been avoided. But, to be brief, Madame Duval, at the instigation of her husband, earnestly, or rather tyrannically, endeavored to effect a union between Miss Evelyn and one of his nephews, and when she found her power inadequate to her attempt, enraged at her non-compliance, she treated her with the grossest unkindness, and threatened her with poverty and ruin. Miss Evelyn, to whom wrath and violence had hitherto been strangers, soon grew weary of this usage, and rashly, and without a witness, consented to a private marriage with Sir John Belmont, a very profligate young man, who had but too successfully found means to insinuate himself into her favor. He promised to conduct her to England. He did. Oh, madame, you know the rest. Disappointed of the fortune he expected, by the inexorable rancor of the Duvals, he infamously burnt the certificate of their marriage, and denied that they had ever been united. She flew to me for protection. With what mixed transports of joy and anguish did I again see her. By my advice she endeavored to procure proofs of her marriage, but in vain. Her credulity had been no match for his art. Everybody believed her innocent from the guiltless tenor of her unspotted youth, and from known libertinism of her barbarous betrayer. Yet her sufferings were too acute for her tender frame, and the same moment that gave birth to her infant put an end at once to the sorrows and the life of its mother. The rage of Madame Duval at her elopement abated not while this injured victim of cruelty yet drew breath. She probably intended in time to have pardoned her, but time was not allowed. When she was informed of her death, I have been told that the agonies of grief and remorse with which she was seized occasioned her a severe fit of illness. But from the time of her recovery to the date of her letter to your ladyship, I had never heard that she manifested any desire to be made acquainted with the circumstances which attended the death of Lady Belmont and the birth of her helpless child. That child, madame, shall never, while life is lent me, know the loss she has sustained. I have cherished, succored, and supported her from her earliest infancy to her 16th year, and so amply has she repaid my care and affection that my fondest wish is now bounded in the desire of bestowing her on one who may be sensible of her worth, and then sinking to eternal rest in her arms. Thus it has happened that the education of the father, daughter, and granddaughter has devolved on me. What infinite misery have the two first caused me! Should the fate of the dear survivor be equally adverse, how wretched will be the end of my cares, the end of my days. Even had Madame Duval merited the charge she claims, I fear my fortitude would have been unequal to such a parting. But, being such as she is, not only my affection, but my humanity recoils at the barbarous idea of deserting the sacred trust reposed in me. Indeed, I could but ill support her former yearly visits to the respectable mansion at Howard Grove. Pardon me, dear madame, and do not think me insensible of the honour which your ladyship's condescension confers upon us both. But so deep is the impression which the misfortunes of her mother have made on my heart, that she does not, even for a moment, quit my sight, without exciting apprehensions and terrors which almost overpower me. Such, madame, is my tenderness, and such my weakness, but she is the only tie I have upon earth, and I trust to your ladyship's goodness not to judge of my feelings with severity. I beg leave to present my humble respects to Mrs. and Miss Mervyn, and have the honour to be, madame, your ladyship's most obedient and most humble servant, Arthur Villars. So apparently this book doesn't have chapters, but much of it is written via letters. It's a little confusing, but I think I'm getting it. Letter 3, written some months after the last. Lady Howard to the Rev. Mr. Villars, Howard Grove, March 8th. Dear and Rev. Sir, your last letter gave me infinite pleasure. After so long and tedious an illness, how grateful to yourself and to your friends must be your returning health. You have the hearty wishes of every individual of this place for its continuance and increase. Continuance. Will you not think I take advantage of your acknowledged recovery if I once more venture to mention your pupil and Howard Grove together? Yet you must remember the patience with which we submitted to your desire of not parting with her during the bad state of your health, though it was with much reluctance we forbore to solicit her company. My granddaughter, in particular, has scarce been able to repress her eagerness to again meet the friend of her infancy, and for my own part, it is very strongly my wish to manifest the regard which I had for the unfortunate Lady Belmont, by proving serviceable to her child, which seems to me the best respect that can be paid to her memory. Permit me, therefore, to lay before you a plan which Mrs. Mervyn and I have formed in consequence of your restoration to health. I would not frighten you, but do you think you could bear to part with your young companion for 2 or 3 months? Mrs. Mervyn proposes to spend the ensuing spring in London, whither, for the first time, my grandchild will accompany her. Now, my good friend, it is very earnestly their wish to enlarge and enliven their party by the addition of your amiable ward, who would share, equally with her own daughter, the care and attention of Mrs. Mervyn. Do not start at this proposal. It is time that she should see something of the world. When young people are too rigidly sequestered from it, their lively and romantic imaginations paint it to them as a paradise of which they have been beguiled. But when they are shown it properly, and in due time, they see it such as it really is, equally shared by pain and pleasure, hope and disappointment. You have nothing to apprehend from her meeting with Sir John Belmont, as that abandoned man is now abroad, and not expected home this year. Well, my good sir, what say you to our scheme? I hope it will meet with your approbation, but if it should not, be assured I can never be displeased at any decision made by one who is so much respected and esteemed as yourself by, dear sir, your most faithful, humble servant, M. Howard. Letter 4. Mr. Villars to Lady Howard. Berry Hill, March 12th, 4 days later. I am grieved, madame, to appear obstinate, and I blush to incur the imputation of selfishness. In detaining my young charge thus long with myself in the country, I consulted not solely my own inclination, destined in all probability to possess a very moderate fortune. I wished to contract her views to something within it. The mind is but too naturally prone to pleasure, but too easily yielded to dissipation. It has been my study to guard her against their delusions, by preparing her to expect and to despise them. But the time draws on for experience and observation to take place of instruction. If I have, in some measure, rendered her capable of using the one with discretion, and making the other with improvement, I shall rejoice myself with the assurance of having largely contributed to her welfare. She is now of an age that happiness is eager to attend. Let her then enjoy it. I commit her to the protection of your ladyship, and only hope she may be found worthy half the goodness I am satisfied she will meet with at your hospitable mansion. Thus far, madame, I cheerfully submit to your desire. In confiding my ward to the care of Lady Howard, I can feel no uneasiness from her absence, but what will arise from the loss of her company, since I shall be as well convinced of her safety as if she were under my own roof. But can your ladyship be serious in proposing to introduce her to the gaieties of a London life? Permit me to ask, for what end, or what purpose? A youthful mind is seldom totally free from ambition. To curb that is the first step to contentment, since to diminish expectation is to increase enjoyment. I apprehend nothing more than too much raising her hopes and her views, which the natural vivacity of her disposition would render but too easy to effect. The town acquaintance of Mrs. Mervyn are all in the circle of high life. This artless young creature, with too much beauty to escape notice, has too much sensibility to be indifferent to it, but she has too little wealth to be sought with propriety by men of the fashionable world. Consider, madame, the peculiar cruelty of her situation, only child of a wealthy baronet, whose person she has never seen, whose character she has reason to abhor, and whose name she is forbidden to claim. Entitled as she is to lawfully inherit his fortune and estate, is there any probability that he will properly own her? And while he continues to persevere in disavowing his marriage with Miss Evelyn, she shall never, at the expense of her mother's honor, receive a part of her right as a donation of his bounty. And as to Mr. Evelyn's estate, I have no doubt but that Madame Duval and her relations will dispose of it among themselves. It seems therefore as if this deserted child, though legally heiress to 2 large fortunes, must owe all her rational expectations to adoption and friendship. Yet her income will be such as may make her happy, if she is disposed to be so in private life, though it will by no means allow her to enjoy the luxury of a London fine lady. Let Miss Mervyn, then, madame, shine in all the splendor of high life, but suffer my child still to enjoy the pleasures of humble retirement, with a mind to which greater views are unknown. I hope this reasoning will be honored with your approbation. I have yet another motive that has some weight with me. I would not willingly give offense to any human being, and surely Madame Duval might accuse me of injustice if, while I refuse to let her granddaughter wait upon her, I consent to her joining a party of pleasure to London. In sending her to Howard Grove, not one of these scruples arise, and therefore Mrs. Clinton, a most worthy woman, formerly her nurse, and now my housekeeper, shall attend her thither next week. Though I have always called her by the name of Anville, and reported in this neighborhood that her father, my intimate friend, left her to my guardianship, yet I have thought it necessary to let her be herself acquainted with the melancholy circumstances attending her birth. For, though I am very desirous of guarding her from curiosity and impertinence, by concealing her name, family, and story, yet I would not leave it in the power of chance to shock her gentle nature with a tale of so much sorrow. You must not, madame, expect too much from my pupil. She is quite a little rustic, and knows nothing of the world, and though her education has been the best I could bestow in this retired place, to which Dorchester, the nearest town, is 7 miles distant, yet I shall not be surprised if you should discover in her 1,000 deficiencies of which I have never dreamt. She must be very much altered since she was last at Howard Grove, but I will say nothing of her. I leave her to your ladyship's own observations, of which I beg a faithful relation, and am, dear madame, with great respect, your obedient and most humble servant, Arthur Villars. Eveline is coming to London. Letter 5. Mr. Villars to Lady Howard. March 18th. Dear Madame, this letter will be delivered to you by my child, the child of my adoption, my affection. Unblessed with one natural friend, she merits 1,000. I send her to you, innocent as an angel, and artless as purity itself, and I send you with her the heart of your friend, the only hope he has on earth, the subject of his tenderest thoughts, and the object of his latest cares. She is one, Madame, for whom alone I have lately wished to live, and she is one whom to serve I would, with transport, die. Restore her but to me, all innocence as you receive her, and the fondest hope of my heart will be amply gratified. Arthur Villars. Letter 6. Lady Howard to the Rev. Mr. Villars, Howard Grove. No date. Dear and Rev. Sir, the solemn manner in which you have committed your child to my care has in some measure damped the pleasure which I receive from the trust, as it makes me fear that you suffer from your compliance, in which case I shall very sincerely blame myself for the earnestness with which I have requested this favor. But remember, my good sir, she is with a few days' summons, and be assured I will not detain her a moment longer than you wish. You desire my opinion of her. She is a little angel. I cannot wonder that you sought to monopolize her, neither ought you at finding it impossible. Her face and person answer my most refined ideas of complete beauty, and this, though a subject of praise less important to you or to me than any other, is yet so striking, it is not possible to pass it unnoticed. Had I not known from whom she received her education, I should, at first sight of so perfect a face, have been in pain for her understanding, since it has been long and justly remarked that folly has ever sought alliance with beauty. She has the same gentleness in her manners, the same natural grace in her motions that I formerly so much admired in her mother. Her character seems truly ingenuous and simple, and at the same time that nature has blessed her with an excellent understanding and great quickness of parts, she has a certain air of inexperience, an innocency that is extremely interesting. You have no reason to regret the retirement in which she has lived, since the politeness which is required by an acquaintance with high life is in her so well supplied by a natural desire of obliging, joined to a deportment infinitely engaging. I observe with great satisfaction a growing affection between this amiable girl and my granddaughter, whose heart is as free from selfishness or conceit as that of her young friend is from all guile. Their attachment may be mutually useful, since much is to be expected from emulation, where nothing is to be feared from envy. I would have them love each other as sisters, and reciprocally supply the place of that tender and happy relationship to which neither of them have a natural claim. Be satisfied, my good sir, that your child shall meet with the same attention as our own. We all join in most hearty wishes for your health and happiness, and in returning our sincere thanks for the favor you have conferred on us. I am, dear sir, your most faithful servant, M. Howard. And I'm going to end it there and kind of give my 2 cents. This is not what I was expecting, particularly, in that this has all just been letters back and forth. And while it took me a little bit, and there was several moments that I was like, okay, is this going to be boring? Is this how it's going to be the whole time? But it really grew on me, and I actually really appreciate this type of storytelling via letters, via emotion and how people communicated back then. I think it really gives it allows us to fill in a lot, of course, but also it allows us to see more into these characters, and really, especially with this last letter, lays a foundation of who Evelina is and her background and the people that cared for her, and I can only imagine that she will not be keeping her innocence, and her naivety will make this a fun read. I don't know if the whole thing is in letters. Let me see. I think it is. It's all via letters. Or maybe it's Evelina writing herself. Kind of like a diary. Okay. So it's Evelina writing in her diary, as well as letters to and from the people that are looking after her and taking care of her. I'm already interested. And so I can see a lot of people maybe not being interested or being turned off by this. I'm excited, and I'm going to continue to read. But if you guys have any suggestions of other books without copyright, maybe old classics that you would love for me to read, and we can talk about and learn and go on another journey together, I would absolutely love that. So, thank you so much for being here and listening. Hopefully you are greatly relaxed, if not sleeping soundly right now. I feel so... I want to sit up straight and... I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Night. Night. Morning. 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 Whatever